Wow, seriously, Ari? You've only just now getting to this topic now that it's been almost 3 weeks since it's happened? Hey, I've got an idea. Why don't you quit shoving beer can chicken Pringles down your throat and keep up with relevant topics, you lazy shit? The Pringles are an acquired taste, in case anyone was wondering. Buy them at your own discretion. MarcoMeatball. A prominent YouTube creator known for his coverage of video game music and his deep passion for the craft has ruffled the feathers of Wuthering Waves players following a tweet that read something like an ultimatum. Phrolova, a major character in the world of Wuthering Waves, known for her direct involvement in the game's story multiple times as an overseer of the Phrolova, was recently confirmed to be available as the next limited banner character in version 2.5. The Phrolova are a major antagonist group for the Rover in the story, a mysterious organization whom believes assimilation with the terrors of the Lament is the next step in human evolution. Their primary goal is resurrection of the Thronodians with the intent to bring upon another Lament to the world, one they refer to as the True Lament. Phrolova herself, being a high-ranking member of the Phrolova, has already had a direct hand in multiple atrocities, with likely a few more to come before we can finally put a ring on her. And as for me, I will definitely be snagging Cristofo as soon as he's playable. This overly confident, cryptic, smug bastard is just my kind of character, and I've wanted him ever since I stepped foot in Renacida. To swing back to Marco's tweet, and to put it simply, Marco declared he would quit Wuthering Waves should Kuro Games flip her morals to justify her joining forces with the Rover. He did say he would be fine if she kept her morally gray standing. However, based on the recent track record of antagonists in previous high-profile gacha games and a possible outline of Chinese game regulations in regards to playable characters with unclear moral boundaries quoted from Twitter's Grok 3 artificial intelligence, the likelihood of that happening is not looking in Kuro's favor to leave be. After some backlash following the tweet and having to walk back some of his more overly passionate claims, the discussion of Phrolova has people wondering what can and will be done to everyone's favorite adult Chinubyo composer. And now that I finally got around to it, I would like to add my voice to the discussion. I'm going to try to speak about the following character examples as broadly as possible to avoid spoiling anyone who don't want the finer details of these characters. If that is still too much for you, skip to the timestamp shown now to jump to the next chapter, as this section will be talking about major characters in Persona 5 Royale, Metaphor Refrantagio, and Fire Emblem Three Houses. The first example of how to create a good playable villain, at least in my opinion, is to create a narrative where the player is allowed to choose between several groups whom all have moral boundaries, political standings, and relationships with the player. Fire Emblem Three Houses is a fantastic example for what I'm referring to with Edelgard von Hresvelg. The setting takes place in the continent of Fodlan, whom is ruled by 3 opposing countries during a time of relative peace. The player assumes the role of a famous mercenary turned professor, teaching in a military officers' academy housed within a monastery built at the very center of the continent, controlled by a neutral religious party known as the Church of Saros.
I'm gonna neutrally cook adjustment. Build a patch exists, my man!
Edelgard, the soon-to-be empress of the Adrestian Empire and leader of one of the 3 selectable houses, the Black Eagles, is an ambitious woman who aims to unite the entire continent through a quick and bloody war in an attempt to uproot the established aristocracy through sacred bloodlines, perpetuated and enforced by the Church, and to later use this united empire to break free from control of the true culprits responsible for Fodlan's long and brutal history. During the 1 year the player is spent teaching their respective house, Edelgard will be frequently making moves behind the scenes to set up for her declaration of war after her time in the academy is over. Most of them, you yourself will get roped into and even suffer dire losses because of her actions. However, if you choose to teach the Black Eagles at the start of the game, bond with Edelgard, and make certain choices just before her betrayal, the player can choose to side with her in her conquest to save the continent through bloody conflict for the second half of the game. While my most preferred way to make a playable antagonist character, this will absolutely never happen in Wuthering Waves. Edelgard works because her and the other 3 playable routes in 3 houses are up to the player's own discretion to decide who to stand with. Be it politics, the actions of each faction, or maybe they just really like a set of characters, or even just one character who's a part of that house. Hey yo, where are my Lizithia fans at? You didn't save her. I don't want nothing to do with you. With that in mind, it should go without saying that Kuro Games will never create a situation where the player is allowed to agree with or even justify the motives or actions of the Phrolova as a whole, so this option is completely off the table. Moving on to my second example is a villain that lacks their own autonomy. Someone who can not act and think for themselves, preferably without the use of mind control, as in most cases, mind control is just a cheap cop-out. Goro Akechi in the Royal expansion for Persona 5 makes for a great example. In the original Persona 5, Akechi was responsible for many immoral and illegal acts that would benefit the person he was working for throughout the game thanks to his ability to access the metaverse, an exaggerated alternate reality where people with strong emotions manifest into twisted, over-the-top imaginings of their inner selves. Tampering with these inner selves would have a knock-on effect on the real-life counterpart. This includes murder, which Goro himself would commit on the regular within the metaverse. During the Royal expansion, Akechi makes a return after the events of the vanilla game to assist the player in resolving the newest conflict and taking down the antagonist. Akechi in Royale is done incredibly well, as his character arc focuses on breaking free from the control of others and living for yourself. This is especially true because it is the very actions of the new antagonist in the Royale expansion that is the very reason why Akechi is even present in the first place, and to stop them would put the very fate of himself into question. Despite knowing the unfavorable outcome, Akechi decides to no longer live under anyone else's rule and continues onward without hesitation and forgoes worrying what might happen to himself afterwards. However, once again, this character arc does not work for Phrolova, as Kuro Games has not established or even hinted at her actions as an overseer in their Phrolova being ones decided upon by anyone other than herself. The last possible example I would like to use of a good former antagonist is a character who is oblivious to the actions of the people they align with. Basilio in Metaphor Refantasio is who comes to mind first to me in this situation. Basilio, initially in the story, is an executive in the private army of Louis Guillaburn, a young, ambitious former general of the royal army whom assassinated the standing king and intends to take the crown through any means necessary, rebuilding the kingdom as a meritocracy that does away with racial prejudice and social divides. Nearly halfway into the game, Basilio joins your party to keep an eye on you as you're attempting to pose as a supporter of Luis with the true intentions of learning his secrets to eventually thwart him. As you spend time with Basilio, he begins to let down his overprotective guard of your actions and actually comes to respecting you and your group, even when it's eventually revealed that you were intending to betray his leader this whole time, as he does not attempt to retaliate when the truth comes out. Eventually, Basilio would leave Luis's side after being exposed to just how truly monstrous and brutal he can be, with no regard for crossing moral boundaries and even harming people Basilio cared deeply over. He would then officially join your party as your last playable character, and remain by your side for the rest of the story. This unfortunately won't work for Phrolova's redemption arc either, as the Phrolova are not exactly subtle whatsoever with their intent of reviving the Thermodians, dismantling entire countries, and accelerating the next lament. Actions which Phrolova herself has had a direct hand in multiple times, so ignorance is 100% out of the question with this one. So at this rate, we've pretty much gone over several possible examples of a playable antagonist done right, yet Phrolova's established character and actions cannot or will not fit into any of these situations. Setting idealism aside, it's time we actually look at examples within the gacha space that we have as a frame of reference for how playable antagonists have been handled. Everyone's concerned with how Kuro might fail with Phrolova's redemption arc. So let's look at prior examples to see what's got everyone so worried. We don't have to go far to find examples, as I'm sure we can all agree the ones people are using for reference comes from Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and Zenless Zone Zero. And if that's the case, their concerns are rightfully so, as Hoyoverse has a history of failing to deliver on meaningful redemption arcs for their previous antagonists. Raiden Shogun, Scaramouche, Sunday, and Hugo Vlad are all examples of Hoyoverse characters that were at one point antagonists, and their character arcs or gray area morals were either swept under the rug or walked back completely for them to be made into marketable banner units. Raiden Shogun's actions during the Inazuma story arc were hastily resolved without the Electro Archon being questioned or called out by her very people when the dust settled. Scaramouche literally wipes his very existence during the Traveler's time in Sumeru, and I guess by extension, his accountability for his actions. Sunday is just sort of dropped into the Astral Express's lap after Jade sets him free for reasons not disclosed in version 2.7 of HSR. Though I'm sure most people don't care how his character arc is going, as a lot of us quit the game in version 3 anyway, myself included. And every single one of Hugo's claims of killing people to protect others have been walked back from version 1.6 to 1.7 of ZZZ, and all we are left with is a guy who claims he will kill when necessary, but will never have to put his money where his mouth is. Well, I guess there was La Senora as a character who remains true to herself. How'd that go again? Oh right, she's dead. So yeah, it looks like people are rightfully worried given how previous patterns of other Chinese-operated gacha games handled their former antagonists. What are my thoughts about it? Well, I already spoiled it in the title of this video, but I'm not worried about what they do with Phrolova. Simply put, I don't hold gacha stories in high regard or have a high expectation for them. Going by just the examples I used in my previous chapter, talking about antagonists I liked, all examples came from retail video games. Unlike gacha games, regular video game stories are written and developed before the release of the game, and because of this, they are given the necessary time to be refined and adjusted where necessary. While yes, most content updates for gacha games are worked on in advance to meet deadlines, that still doesn't change the fact that these games need to be pumping out content in a 6-week update cycle period, and gachas themselves can end up being developed for more than a decade. In that long period of time, the story can have a dramatic shift that creates issues such as inconsistencies in world building, overly verbose story runtime, or glorified filler content. Writing staff could change completely, and with it the original vision of the world and characters left behind by the former visionaries of a project. And on top of all that, gacha characters still need to be sold to their players in event banners, and therefore killing them off or even just representing an undesirable set of morals or ideals could cost them sales revenue, and therefore will never happen. So why put so much importance on a story that bends at the whim of money so easily? Because of this, I find myself able to more freely connect with and enjoy characters that are otherwise unpopular with certain communities. Similarly to how I watch anime, I only pay attention to what my favorite characters in any scene are saying or doing, and everything else is a secondary priority. I like Raiden Shogun because I like Sawashiro Miyuki in Japanese VA. Purple is my favorite color, and I like traditional Japanese women. I like Vivian because I like her gothic aesthetic, the use of purple, her petite frame, and her obsession with Python is adorable in my opinion. And I like Diane for her refined and elegant design and demeanor. As for Phrolova, I like her design and her Chinubyo aesthetic with the bandaged eye. And however Kuro Games decides to justify her joining the Rover won't make me suddenly stop liking those things about her. Because this is Gathering Wives, and I will intend to be adding one more to my collection. And with that, I have said all I really wanted to about the Phrolova situation in Wuthering Waves. As far as factions are concerned, I actually find the Fraxidus, for me personally, to be the most interesting faction we have in the game as of right now, and I wouldn't mind seeing more playable characters coming from that group. While Kuro definitely will need some finesse to pull off Phrolova's redemption, I suspect future Fraxidus characters will be much easier for them to write with the intent to eventually be playable. So long as I can add Cristoforo to my list of characters, I will be happy with what comes next. But until then, this has been Arikado Zodan, and I'm clocking out.